By now, you've probably seen the images of people marching through Washington, D.C. and vandalizing monuments, among other things. We'll get into that in a moment, but I want you to hear a little bit of the cover that's being flown for these vandals. It says this in ABC News: thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters came together Saturday to call for a ceasefire, an end to the siege on the Gaza Strip, at a march in Washington, D.C.'s Freedom Plaza. The protest was organized by 9 groups and has participation from 500 groups from around the country, according to organizers. Photos of the peaceful march, which called for a ceasefire and the end to the Israeli government's siege on Gaza that started in retaliation of Hamas's surprise terror attack on Israel on October 7th, show thousands gathered in the streets of D.C. following a rally. The protesters marched to the White House. Now, the reason I wanted to read that to you is that this protest was called peaceful. Well, let's see if it really was peaceful. So here's some clips that you can see on the screen. Now I'll explain those clips to those who are listening. So we have monuments being defaced, Free Palestine being written on them. We also have hijabs being placed over statues that are right there in quote-unquote Freedom Plaza, and then Palestinian flags being placed in those statues' hands, and then Palestinian flags all around. We see Free Palestine as much as we possibly can. Then we also see some other vandalism on the streets and on the walls. It's going to go a little bit fast, so I'll try to explain to you exactly what is written on these walls here. But the first one says, "Death to Israel." The next one is a profanity-laced statement with Israel at the end of it, so I'll let you use your imagination. So cuss word, Israel. And then the final one says, "Gaza will win." So as you can see, absolutely, totally peaceful. Let's not also forget that at this same march, there were people that suggested that Israel should go to some place that, well, isn't all that pleasant. You can see that here.
Right to rebel. Israel can go to hell.
Go to hell, Israel. Well, okay. Well, apparently go to heaven, Muslims, and enjoy your virgins as you murder and slaughter innocent people intentionally, not accidentally or not as a part of a military operation. Anyway, we could say much more about that, maybe about the drone attack that Biden did early in his presidency, but too much to go into right now. At least let's just say this. I have an argument to make on the show today, and it's one that I hope you will listen to very, very carefully. The people that are protesting in Washington, D.C., or in other places, especially in London, that are saying Free Palestine, when they say Free Palestine, what are they asking to be free from? Or maybe better question, whom do they need to be free from? See, the implication here, and I know the vast majority of these people are young college kids who are not really brilliant people yet because they haven't really learned to think for themselves in really critical ways. But the implication here, whether they would say it explicitly or not, is that they want Palestine to be free of Jews. Well, I've got good news for you. Guess how many Jews live in Gaza? That's correct, 0. Guess how many Palestinian or Arab Muslims, if you want to say it, live in Israel? Well, tons, because the place that is tolerant of Arab Muslims and Palestinians is Israel. The place where they are not tolerated is in Gaza. So in fact, they have been freed. And this is clearly a talking point of Hamas to ask for Palestine to be free. And by the way, they think Palestine is the current land that is occupied by Israel, that's their land too. So when they say Free Palestine, they literally mean to genocidally wipe off the face of the map Israel. I know a lot of these young adults, again, think that what they're saying when they say Free Palestine, they're saying free them from rocket attacks or free them from death of civilians. Well, if you really want to do that, then I would highly encourage you to add something to your oddly short Free Palestine slogan. I would add Free Palestine from Hamas, because the people that are calling for civilian casualties are Hamas, and the people that are trying to protect civilians as much as possible in the midst of a very difficult war is Israel's military. This is well documented. It's not even worth going into great detail. This is documented by the fact that Hamas leaders are sitting in Qatar enjoying Mai Tais and sitting in their nice little mansions raking in billions of dollars while they demand that people stand for fire and become martyrs for the cause and stay in Gaza.
A big salute to our people in Gaza. A big salute to those with their blood.
This is what Hamas leaders are saying. So if you want to blame the right people, maybe you should be saying free Palestine from Hamas rather than free Palestine, because it's oddly short. It's eerily short, in fact, because we can fill in the blanks for you. And so there is an implication here. Perhaps if you really wanted to take a position of moral fortitude, you might say free hostages from Palestine. There are currently 233 hostages being held in tunnels underneath Palestine, which, by the way, the Iron Dome for Hamas is Palestine civilian areas, because these cowards live in tunnels like rats, like the rats that they are, because their Iron Dome is trying to use civilians as human shields. They don't have Iron Dome like Israel, so they created an Iron Dome for themselves. It just happens to be in civilian areas. Suffice to say, what about those hostages? Doesn't Israel have a right to fight against the people who are holding their own citizens hostages, including infants? Needless to say, this Free Palestine protest is clearly as stupid as it sounds, and even worse. The reason this is implicit support for Hamas is that even though some of these people don't understand why they're doing what they're doing, but doing it nonetheless, is the reason this is problematic is because what it does is it gives energy to Hamas, and it makes them think that, and they might not be totally wrong here, it makes them think that the West is in support of what they're doing, that as long as they continue to lie and continue to allow their own civilians to be killed and put them in harm's way without care for their safety, as long as they can keep on doing that, then the West will continue to support them. So in other words, we're creating an incentive structure through our Free Palestine protests for these evil, wicked men to do what they've been doing. And it's odd to me that we haven't taken the time to even really mourn what happened on October 7th. There were no protests that were calling for free Israel from Hamas. There were no people that were crying out really in large fashion, like we're seeing with Palestine, against what took place in Israel. So all of that needs to be paid attention to. And if you're not paying attention to it, it is simply because you don't care to. So, by the way, while I believe that Free Palestine is implicit support of Hamas, who does have a constitution, as it were, and a preamble, unlike ours. Their preamble says that the Jews exist and will exist until Islam totally eliminates them entirely. I highly encourage you to check out the Hamas Charter before you shout Free Palestine, if it is, like I suggest, implicit support. But, by the way, it is explicit support. It is explicitly supportive of Hamas when you say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Because we're talking about a river that's on one side of Israel and a sea that's on the other side of Israel. So when you say from the rivers to the sea, Palestine will be free, now you're saying the quiet part out loud. You want Israel to totally be genocidally destroyed. You are. There's no question about it. If you're shouting that, now you're explicitly supporting the same agenda as Hamas. And what makes you different than them exactly? You may not be picking up a gun, but please do not believe you're standing on any kind of moral high ground just because you can come up with a number of innocent civilians that have been killed on either side. Suffice to say, when evil rears its ugly head in a fallen world, it must be dealt with. And unfortunately, it isn't always dealt with in the best way possible. It is an unfortunate, again, reality of these kind of things. But this also brings me to kind of a startling realization for us as parents, especially you Christian parents out there. If most of these people are young adults, and they are, or old female liberals, then this tells us something that we know about college kids. Winston Churchill said that when I was young, I was a bleeding heart liberal, but when I became older, I grew a brain and became a conservative. So if you're young and if you're young and you're not a liberal, you don't have a heart. And if you're old and you're not a conservative, you don't have a brain. That's kind of the quote as it goes. But suffice to say, it's a reminder to us that kids are incredibly impressionable, and that we as Christians need to quit isolating and insulating our kids from the truth. This generation of kids, we're told, are more anxious, more depressed, and the culture war constantly is all around them, and so it makes them anxious and stressed out all the time, and we just need a sanctuary for our children. No, you don't. We've been protecting our Christian kids for far too long. So when we finally ship them off to university, guess what they get exposed to? This kind of malicious and ridiculous rhetoric that if you're not a critical thinker, if you don't know how to mock, like I argued on Tuesday's show, if you don't know how to do that, you will quickly fall for the arguments that you're hearing from these people. And you won't know how to think for yourself. Yes, these arguments are as stupid as they sound, but trust me, people, especially kids, will fall for them. This is how a group of mostly young adults become moral idiots when we try to protect our kids from this truth. You should have already sat your kids down, I think probably regardless of age, but obviously when you think about age, you're careful about what you tell them, but you should be clear to tell them what took place and why it's so important that they understand what happened there. If you don't, you're creating a sanctuary, sure, for your kids, but it's the wrong kind of safety. You're padding a room for them and coddling them so that they can't think for themselves, and you're making them a prime target for what will take place, the radicalization that takes place on college campuses and universities. Eventually, your teenagers will leave your home, and you might have protected them, you might have provided safety, you might have paid for their bills, you might have taken care of them, but please take care of their mental acuity, take care of their moral fortitude, and give them a moral compass, especially in issues like what's going on right now. If you don't, your kids, yes, your Christian kids, will fall victim to what many kids on campuses all over the United States are falling victim to right now. I call it fill in the blank social justice. Now, by that I mean you can put anything in front of the word justice, like economic justice, racial justice, climate justice, economic justice. You can do whatever you want. Not only that, but also that there's a blank in the human heart, and that's why we're constantly looking for some cause to attach ourselves to provide some kind of meaning. And the real problem with that is that when we start doing that with a movement like Free Palestine, we have to be careful that we're not echoing what Hamas actually says, which they shout Free Palestine too, and they don't finish the sentence, but what they mean when they say it is Free Palestine from all Jews. So on the one hand, you've got people who want climate justice, but also are advocating for genocide. How can you say that you're really doing that because you care about the well-being of people? Even if you're not doing that explicitly, it may be implicit, which is very dangerous. And again, all of this simply because we have a hole in the human heart that we're trying to fill up with just about any kind of garbage, when we need to do what G.K. Chesterton said. He said, when you stop believing in God, it doesn't mean that you start believing in nothing. He says it means you'll believe in anything. So we need to take his word seriously and understand that we need to fill the void that's in the human heart with something big enough to fill it, which isn't a social justice cause. It's actually God.
So you just got done watching a small excerpt of a much larger episode. You can find the link to that full episode down below in the description of this video. So you definitely want to check that out, because if you like that clip, you'll like the much larger episode. And while you're at it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and click that little bell to be notified when great new episodes of Indie Thinker come your way. Thanks for watching.